Okay, if you look at the front of your page of the handout I gave you, the handout is always going to describe to you what your pre-lab assignment is and your post-lab assignment. So it's really 2 assignments just got handed to you. The pre-lab assignment is due tomorrow, and then you do the lab, and the post-lab assignment's due Friday. So the pre-lab assignment is typically written in the middle of the front page. So here's where it says the pre-laboratory assignment. It says write the title, problem, and safety in your lab notebook. So we take our lab notebook and we write the title in the title spot, Chemistry of Fire. And if we don't really have a project, but the date we intend to do the lab is 8/27. You go ahead and write down 8/27 for the date. Oh, and by the way, you always do your lab in ink. So go ahead and switch to an ink pen now. Okay, and the reason why we do it in ink is that you wouldn't erase any of your observations. If you did something wrong in the lab and wrote it down, that's okay. You would just add on to it when you did it right the second time. So this is what happens when I do it wrong. This is what happens when I do it right. So in a lab situation, you just keep everything. You keep your mistakes as well as your successes on your paper. Okay, the next thing it wants us to write is the problem. So we write problem. And on the top of the page of the handout, it says problem, what is the most efficient flame of the Bunsen burner? So we write that down. That is the most efficient. Do you need to borrow a pen? Okay, so in that box, that blue box over there that says police, there's pens. Does anybody else need to borrow one? The lid comes up the top. What is the most efficient flame for the Bunsen burner, and how is a Bunsen burner used to heat various substances? So we write the problem down word for word because that's kind of the goal of the lab. We don't want to answer these questions now. We want to do the lab tomorrow to find out what the answers to these questions are. Right? Okay, so that's kind of your goal in this lab. The next thing it wants us to write down is the safety. So go ahead and write safety. And safety is always on the top of the second page. So if you open your handout to the second page, that's where the safety is. And you can paraphrase your safety. So it says, number 1 says, wear safety goggles whenever working in the laboratory. So number 1, I would write, wear goggles. Yes?
For the quiz, if there's like a 2-word answer, and you got one of the words right, can you get half a point?
Yes.
I do that.
When using a Bunsen burner, confine long hair and loose clothing. So it may be hair up, no loose clothes. Then the next it says never leave the burner unattended. So never leave burner alone. So one of you stays with the lab as long as the burner is on. And every once in a while something happens and we need to have someone notice right away if the burner falls over or something like that. Do not reach over the burner. Okay, so this happens all the time in the lab. You'll start to you'll go to try and do your lab. Your neighbors, their Bunsen burners started right away, and you seem to be having trouble. And that's because some of the strikers are excellent strikers and make us good spark every time. And some of the strikers are not as good or even have worn out completely. If they've worn out completely, you should tell me because I can fix that. But if your striker's not really working for you, you say to your neighbors across the way, hey, can I borrow your striker? And they say, of course. But then they don't stick their arm through the burner, right? Because then they've lit their sleeve on fire. So you can share your striker, but don't put your arm in the flame. Okay, no flammables near the burner. So there's spray bottles back there with cleanser for after the lab is over. That's flammable. So you would not take that bottle of cleanser and like stick it above the flame because you could make a giant fireball, which you don't want to do. So you keep the flammables away. 3, when heating test tubes, do not point the open end towards any person. So point test tubes away from people. And it says, do not heat the bottom of the test tube. So when you heat your test tube, you're going to have put these test tube holder on it. You'll hold it back here because you want your hand to be out of the flame, and you don't want to point it towards anyone. But the reason why you don't heat the bottom is if I was heating it like this, the bottom of the test tube's water gets really, really hot and starts to boil, but the stuff above it is cold, and so then that boiling water makes pressure and shoots the water up through the top. Okay? So that's why we don't heat the bottom. Instead, we turn it this way, of course, point it away from our neighbors, and we'll go in and out of the flame gently so that we heat the whole test tube, so that every bit of it will get heated. So there won't be one part that's cold and one part that's hot. Okay, so if we look back to the checklist on the front of the paper, we just accomplished bullet point 1. We wrote the title, problem, and safety in our lab notebook. Bullet point 2 says write the procedure in T-notes format. So T-notes format, you leave a little bit of space after where you put safety, and then you put a horizontal line across your paper. And then you're going to do a vertical line down the middle so that we make this like a T. The center of the paper is right under the O and the J in project. And so then you just draw a line all the way down, turning the bottom half of your paper into a T. Above the left-hand side, you write procedure. And above the right-hand side, you write observations. So we're going to fill in the procedure part today, because that's in the pre-lab. You'll fill in the observations tomorrow while you're doing the lab.
You go all the way down.
Yes, go ahead and go all the way down. Okay, so procedure we can paraphrase too. So number 1 on the procedure says, be sure the hose is securely fastened to both the burner and the gas outlet. So I might do number 1, secure the hose, or secure hose. Then number 2 says turn on the gas to maximum open position and light the burner. Light the burner with the striker. So 2, I might say turn on gas and light Bunsen burner. And then tomorrow, when you do that and you've lit the Bunsen burner, over here you describe what it looks like. What color is your flame when you first turn it on? Write that over here, right next to the 2. That's why we have it in T-notes, so you can look at your observations. You know what was going on in the lab because you have the procedure right beside it. Number 3 says the flame can be adjusted by turning the barrel or opening the air ports. If the flame is a yellow color, use the barrel and the air ports to adjust it until it is completely blue and shows an inner cone. If the flame is blue, but doesn't have an inner cone, adjust the barrel until the inner cone is visible. So what you want it to look like is that there are 2 different colors of blue in your flame, a light blue and a dark blue. If you only see one blue, you need to make an adjustment. If you see any color besides blue, you need to make an adjustment. You may turn on your flame and notice that it's perfect right away because you're going last out of the day. So people have already adjusted that burner all day long to make it a nice flame. However, some of them, the air port is loose and will, by jostling it, turn shut again. So you might need to adjust your air port. So if you don't see the inner cone, the 2 colors of blue, you'll have to make an adjustment. So number 3 is adjust flame to see inner cone. And I'm going to be walking around all lab time, so if you're not sure if your flame looks right, you can just ask me. And so in this procedure part, in a few minutes, I'm going to stop talking and I'll let you guys finish, and you'll just keep paraphrasing all the way down to 10. If you have big handwriting and you fill up a whole page, that's okay. You just go to the next page, make another T, and keep going. Okay, there's plenty of pages here. You'll be able to do fine. Okay, so that's the middle part of the pre-lab assignment. The third part of the pre-lab assignment, so bullet point 3, is where the questions are. Usually there'll be more than one question, but this first lab there's just one question. It says, what is the proper color for a burner flame? And you write your answer right here on the piece of paper. You write your answer. The answer to these questions in general on pre-lab assignments will either be 1, they're stuff you learned in class, or 2, they're in this paragraph up here. That's the introduction. Okay, so I probably already mentioned what color it was,
Blue.
but it's let people do their own thinking. But it's also up here in this paragraph. So no, you weren't supposed to say it out loud. Okay, so you write the color that Brady said right here, and tomorrow at the beginning of lab, I'm going to walk around and take the top sheet and see that you did this, and you'll get points for having done a pre-lab assignment. Then you'll do the lab, writing your observations in here, and then before Friday, you'll answer these post-laboratory questions on the back. Does that make sense? Okay.